So Project Veritas is putting out their new video today, and they've already put out a snippet. The full version is supposed to be out at noon today, Eastern Time. And what it is, it's a field organizer for Bernie Sanders' campaign, and he's saying all sorts of crazy things. For example, he says that Trump supporters will need to be re-educated after Bernie wins the election, and that's what Bernie's free education for all plan is. It's so we can re-educate all these Trump supporters. He says that gulags will be necessary, and actually they're not that bad of a thing. They're a good thing. He says that if Bernie doesn't win the nomination, there'll be violence in Milwaukee. If Trump wins again, there'll be blood on the streets and things like that. Now, let me first say, I don't personally know how much authority this person has in Bernie's campaign, but it's clear he's an organizer and he's someone with some sort of authority. No doubt Bernie's response to this will be, well, I didn't know that people were thinking like that. And for the purposes of this video, I'll give Bernie the benefit of the doubt and say that he didn't know that people under him were thinking like this. But this is proof that clearly they are. And it's no surprise because I could just say anecdotally from people I know that are Bernie supporters and from the response you get on campuses and other places like that, you could see that this is a prevalent belief when it comes to kind of the progressive left in a lot of circles. Maybe not all of them, but in a lot. And that is, they are convinced that they are morally superior. They're willing to use violence and they're willing to use the authority of the state to force people to change their mind. They're willing to censor people and stop their First Amendment rights. They're against things like the right of free speech. And they're willing to do all this because they assume they are morally correct, and they assume that if you disagree with them, then you're morally inferior. This is the problem I had with the whole is it okay to punch a Nazi thing. Because once you say yes, it's just a short step from saying, and everyone who disagrees with me is Nazis. You can see that in this Jurek character that Project Veritas is outing, where he says, if you advocate eliminating people based on race or eliminating based on religion, then yes, you should expect violence to be directed at you. But who's doing that? Again, it's just this constant media narrative that we see, oh, Trump supporters are all racist. That's the danger. That's where this violence sort of comes from. I talk about this a lot, but all of our cultural institutions of power, those that shape the public narrative, are dominated by the establishment Democrat talking points. So we have the media, we have academia, we have the entertainment industry, we have Silicon Valley. And when they all control that, they get this sort of groupthink and propaganda belief that everyone who disagrees with them needs to be silenced and they're morally inferior and they're racist, etc. We can see that that's what's going on, at least with this Bernie supporter and organizer in his campaign. Now, I've said often, the problem with socialism is that when you advocate for massive government control over your life, that it ends up allowing people that you wouldn't want to have that power eventually come to power. Even if you think Bernie's a good guy, and for the purpose of this video, we'll go along with that, that doesn't mean that people that aren't good people would be put in positions of power and ultimately have authority to do things to people, to use state power, to use the government power to influence people's lives. For example, Bernie's judgment apparently wasn't good enough to appoint this person, so let's say Bernie's president and he starts to appoint people under him that are in actual governmental positions. Who's to say they don't decide? Yes, we know that Trump supporters were morally inferior and need re-educated. Yes, we think that gulags are a good idea. What evidence do we have that Bernie would be able to control that? On the contrary, we see every time that we get a communist or a massive socialist government, we end up seeing that even if it started off with good intentions, the boot of the government is eventually used to crush those that disagree with them. That's the problem with giving the government this much power. You can actually see a lot of what you see this person saying in academia now. These SJW characters, they're actually making the argument that gulags are good. They'll be necessary. They're making the argument that what the Soviet Union did wasn't that bad. Stalin killed upward 25 to 50 million people, his own people. We don't even know how many by a scale of 25 million people. That's horrendous. Yet they're making excuses for the gulags? Oh, well, you got money. Oh, you had food and shelter. Doesn't this sound a lot like the same people that make excuses for slavery? Hey, they had homes, we fed them. It's repugnant and disgusting. It's no different than saying, oh, well, concentration camps in Nazi Germany weren't that bad. They actually had some good points. They weren't as bad as people talk about. That's how terrible Stalin's regime was as well. Yet here we see Bernie, someone high up in his campaign, at least to the level of an organizer, a community organizer, making these sorts of arguments. So, again, I'm not saying Bernie is personally saying, yes, we should throw Trump supporters in gulags, but I'm saying that his mentality of giving massive government control over all areas of our lives, just look at like the Green New Deal that he advocates, so we give them almost total control over the energy sector, almost total control over the U.S. economy, etc. The problem is when you do that, people, bad actors and bad characters will eventually come to power. we can see that there are a lot of people in Bernie's circle that are these bad actors. And the last thing I'll say is remember this. Never forget, the person that shot Steve Scalise and all of those Republicans at a ball field was a Bernie supporter. I didn't blame Bernie. I defended him and said, look, we shouldn't judge Bernie because one of his supporters did this. But Bernie was a hypocrite about the whole situation. After Charlottesville, he blamed exclusively Trump and Trump's rhetoric for that. After Gifford was shot, he blamed Republicans and their rhetoric for that. But when his supporter went out and did something violent and shot up at Republicans, he blamed all violence and said it was absurd to say just his people were violent. There are clearly some violent ideologues that have surrounded themselves around Bernie, and it's incumbent on him to come out, take those people, get those people out of his campaign, and to speak out vigorously against this. So, hey, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. I'll have a link below where you can follow me on Twitter, BitChute, Patreon, or PayPal, and things like that if you'd like. And I'll be putting out more videos as the week goes on. So, thanks everyone, and have a good one.